All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Mike Yakovlev, and I'm going to be talking about reimagining iconic anime backgrounds in 3D. So, a bit about myself first is that I have over 10 years professional experience as a digital artist, and within the past 5 years, the first 5 years, I was primarily a concept artist doing illustrations, digital paintings, things like that, and then the focus is usually cyberpunk cities, dark, synthwave kind of things. I really love those kind of things, really cinematic artwork. And then around 5 or so years ago, I learned Blender. I think a lot of people really started picking it up around then. And immediately, a lot of my work just switched into a lot of 3D based. So you can see some album artworks here, illustrations, and how a lot of them are now primarily done in Blender. And I pretty much use Blender in all my work. It used to be mostly Photoshop, but now it's all Blender, and I would like it to be all Blender as much as possible. If I can do Blender from start to finish without any special tricks, I would love that. So pretty much there. So a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. Just a couple things I'm going to be going over: scene layout, color and lighting, parallax and animation, anime bloom, and then just future work, experiments, things I've been messing around with. So I'm going to play a quick movie here that is basically a year's worth of work, and then I'll talk about how I created it. Thank you. Yeah, so I basically took 9 shots from the 1988 anime film Akira and decided to recreate them in Blender with Eevee. Yeah, I mean, I did a couple shots initially just because the movie is obviously such a big influence for me, and I love the world building. These really, really short, there are a few frames. They're not even that long in the actual grand scheme of the whole anime. But they just give you such a sense of scale. They do such a good job of world building that I was like, hey, let me just pay homage. Let me just make 1 or 2, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about Blender. I learned a lot about Eevee, and this is just for me a really fun way to learn something. Find something I want to recreate in Blender, ask myself if I can do it, and then just go for it. And along the way, my process changed, Blender changed. I mean, this spanned 3.6 all the way to 4.2 or so, but I mostly kept it around 3.6. You'll see why later. But yeah, it was really, really fun, and I'm going to continue working like this in my personal work because it's a really fun way to learn, I think, Blender and just any new workflow, and you can just kind of experiment. All right, so the first thing I want to cover is scene layout. So here's a really good shot of a couple of the shots that I did and just how they look outside of the camera view. The way that I like to use Blender is I just kind of make the stuff I want. I don't really I'm not super technical, and I don't need to be, because coming from a 2D background, I just want it to look good in the final frame. And in this animation specifically, it was all about just what the camera sees. So as long as it looks good for the camera, I really don't care about anything else. And so I like using Eevee for that reason, because it's really fast, it's really responsive. You know, I'm a little bit impatient, I'm a little bit lazy, so Eevee and this type of workflow is like super perfect for me. You can see just like the little orange dots at the bottom, that's the camera, and then everything is just like the field of view of the camera, everything that's in the field of view of the camera, that's what needs to be shown. Here's three other scenes. This one all the way on the right, or on my right, your right, my left. You can see like in the background, there's these really, really simple buildings, and the camera just pans all the way, or just comes all the way down. So it starts really simple and then comes down to this more like detailed environment. In the middle, same thing, just whatever is in the view of the camera, everything else is like, there's no floor, there's no background, nothing like that. And then on the shot in the bar scene right there with that guy spray painting, that's like, again, it's just that one spot. I think I did a couple other angles, so I built out a little bit, but I really didn't do too much. Oh, by the way, this is a bit of an Easter egg. Does anyone know who that vandal is? Does anyone know who that is? It's Ian Hubert, that's right. The GOAT, had to put him in there. I mean, I think like early on when I started learning Blender, Ian was probably, his videos, his like lazy tutorials was like the biggest. It really blew my mind of like what you could do and like how you can get there. And it was just one of the biggest reasons that I learned Blender, and it really influenced how I approach Blender. Yeah, shout out to Ian. So a quick overview of some of the 3D models that I use to make my scenes. The stuff that's like the buildings and stuff, those buildings in the top corner, those are the buildings I used for the majority of the animations. And they're like really simple, really low poly, mid poly buildings that I just made for myself to use, and then eventually I like, put them out for free for a lot of people to use, and they ended up, a lot of people liking them, and a lot of people use them, so that's awesome. And then you can see these like really simple, just cube buildings. Those are like way in the background, just like emission textures, nothing fancy. And then in some cases, I would have to use like specific models, like I made that crosswalk sign that was very interesting to make, and I made it for that shot. Some cases where you see more buildings, I needed to make like very specific buildings, so I would just study the screenshot and just make the buildings. A lot of textures from Polyhaven, so shout out to Polyhaven. The one like neon billboard scene, that whole entire asset was made by an amazing artist in the community named Yokai Graphics, so shout out to him for making that, because that really pushed me along with the project. And then just a couple of assets here and there from Big, Medium, Small. I think we all know them, so shout out to them. All right, let me get into the color and lighting. So this is a quick look at one of the big scenes here. Is that at the top, like you can see lights on, the bottom lights off, and you can see already this is like Eevee 3.6. So how much having lighting can influence like the depth of a scene, the spatial kind of like area, how it can make a scene go from looking really flat to looking like there's some dimensionality. And then at the top-down view, you can see like the organization of the buildings. They're not really in any specific order. I'm just looking at it and then placing buildings where I think they need to go, and then animating them. You can see in the outliner there's a bit of lights, all the lights that I have in the scene. So one thing I wanted to touch on was, this was a technique that I found pretty early on. I mean, I don't think I discovered it, but it was something that I found through just messing around, poking around, and it was really, really fun too. I just ended up abusing it for the whole project. But essentially, like I would have one of these really powerful area lights, uplighting a building, making it look nice and pretty, nice gradient and everything like that. Then, if I want the top of the building to be dark, but I don't want to like clamp the light or do anything special with it, I like it. I want to leave it. Like, I'm not super technical, so I'm just thinking, like, what can I do to just make the top dark? Like, force it. I take the light, duplicate it, and just invert the value. So that makes, like, this really weird, probably thing that I'm breaking. I'm probably not supposed to do it this way thing. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm having fun now. Like, Blender is fun. Like, the fact that you can do this and not crash Blender, like, you can't really do this in any other program. You can't just input a negative value or some absurd value. Like, what happens if you put a negative value on the camera? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, actually, nothing happens because I did test it earlier today. I was like, dang, what if it did something? That'd be crazy, right? But I did it with the lights, and this was really fun. So you can see the light. It's like a negative light. It's a shadow maker, like whatever you want to call it. I don't know. There's no name for it, right? Light absorber. But it does have a color. It's that same pink color. If you take that color and turn it into something else, now you're kind of like painting with lights. And again, this is just, it's really simple, but for me, I'm like, oh, now I can not only darken the surface, but I can also change the color of like that shadow if I want to. So value-wise, it still stays pretty dark, but now there's a color there, so you can really get some really interesting results. And I think that transition between the pink and the blue on the windows specifically, there's something interesting happening there that I'm not controlling, but it's really fun. So it kind of like continues to inspire me as I work. So you can see a good comparison. On the left side, no negative light, no shadow maker things, and then on the right side, they are activated. And you can see what that does. It really creates contrast. So if I want buildings in the foreground to feel close, I will put a lot of these like negative lights on them. And if I want buildings in the background to feel further away, even if they're not actually further away, I just don't use any of them, or I use like lighter values or something like that. So for color, this is a fun thing that I used on the project. Again, just like a scene breakdown where the camera is, the street light, and then the scene. See, like the buildings are all tilted. Like I'm not following any rules. I'm just doing whatever looks right. And it's always fun to like snap out of the camera and see what it looks like. But I have this big volume cube there. And essentially what that volume cube is doing, so on the right, you can see there's no volume. And you can see that it looks very cold. You know, it looks how it looks, very digital and all that stuff. So on the left, I just have that big cube, very, very low density, a little higher anisotropy, and then a bit of color absorption. So it's absorbing that color, that blue, and then leaving us with this like warm wash over the entire scene. And this is very lightweight, especially with Eevee, it's very fast. So if you want to just take your scene and give it a quick color tint just to see how it feels, you can do this method, and it's really fun because you can really sit there and just move the color wheel around all day long and be like, oh my God, there's like a million versions of my scene that I could do. So a lot of time wasted on that. This is fun. So like I made it pink, and then it gave it this like matrixy, like neon color. And I'm not changing anything. All the lighting, everything is still the same, but it just gives it a totally new mood. So this was just something really fun. Wanted to share. So let me go into the parallax and animation. So this is a big part of the like feeling of watching the anime, and then also in my version. So one thing you'll notice there on the left is the camera is not moving at all. So the camera is still, and I'm just kind of like puppeting the scene for the camera. And the reason I do that is because it gives me more control about how the parallax is moving. So if I just have the objects and I move the camera around it, I can't really control what building, reveals and which building is closer or whatnot. Here, I can move the foreground building faster than the rest, and it makes it feel like it's closer. Or I can rotate the building and make it look like the camera is orbiting the city structures. And I do that a lot. So it's really fun to kind of play with like the expectations, or like, I would even trip myself out sometimes doing these scenes. So here you can see another good example where it's just a simple kind of camera's just coming down and landing on this end spot. And in the background, when it reloads, you'll see it. So the buildings are low, and then they move up. So when the camera moves down and the buildings move up, it really creates this like distorted, like hypnotizing effect. And it's really cool. And I think it really, like, if you ever do this in your animations, I highly recommend it, because like you can have a lot of fun with like how it looks. Here's another good one where it's like this like dolly zoom effect, but the camera is barely moving. The only thing that's moving in the foreground, I have 3 buildings that I'm pulling towards the camera, and the background buildings I'm pushing away from the camera. So it looks like there's like a focal shift, but really it's just, things are just moving. It's really, really simple. It creates a really cool effect, especially with a lot of these shots. I want the buildings to feel massive. I want them to feel like they are alive, like the city is alive. So these effects like came really in handy. Here's one more where the building's all the way in the foreground, like the camera's all the way on the left there. The buildings in the foreground are moving down and forward, and then everything beyond kind of like that pyramidal building in the middle, they're kind of lifting up. So then you kind of get this like tilting effect, and it's really subtle, but when you watch it, especially on a big screen like this, you really feel like, whoa, I'm like falling into this cityscape. It's really cool. All right, I want to talk about anime bloom. So in 3.6, as we all know, anime bloom was right there, and that was very handy. I loved it, and I've talked to Clement about this. But yeah, so the bloom is really not much I can say about it. It really just works. It's really amazing. A couple things that I would do personally is I would just bring the threshold way down, because that really kind of spreads out the bloom a lot more and makes it a little bit more even. The radius, also I would play with that. Sometimes I would type in my own value just to see. The knee, I have no idea what that does. I have no idea what that does. So this is like an extreme example. The threshold's all the way down, radius is all the way up, and then the knee, I don't know if that's helping or not. But you can see the bloom is like everywhere. It's very cool. I like that. I actually did not use that in my scene, but I would use that for a future project because, I don't know, it's very dreamy. It's very dreamlike. That's something that I could see using in the scene at some point. And I know like anime has a lot of these like very overexposed, blooming scenes. So I just think that looks cool. I would use that for something. It's kind of skipping forward, like I did end up trying the newer versions of Bloom and later versions of Blender, like 4.5. And I found I did actually like this more. I did like having Bloom in the compositor because it kind of gave me that control, which I really like. So here's an example of one where I have one glare node that's kind of localizing the bloom just around the emissive object, and then a second one that just kind of does a more broad, higher quality, low threshold that kind of like, like just puts it everywhere. And I like that. I realize now, like, oh, I couldn't really control as much, but now there's way more control, and I definitely love it. So I'll just touch on a bit of like future work I've been doing, other anime experiments, things like that. So these are 3 scenes that other projects, other animes that I really like. So we got One Punch Man, Mob Psycho, and then Evangelion. And the one on the left is a cycles render, so that was me seeing like, okay, can I get that anime bloom in a cycles render? And you can, it works, it's very responsive, but the overall vibe of the rest of the scene feels very realistic, and it doesn't feel as like stylized or anime, in my opinion, but I still think it looks good. So if you're doing some hyper-realistic background anime, you could definitely still achieve a similar effect with just pure cycles, no fancy like add-ons or nothing like that. The one in the middle is purely a black and white scene. This is just Eevee again. There's a really bright emissive plane behind the character, and all I did was I brought down the threshold, and then I gave the bloom a blue color, so it kind of gives this like really cold, overexposed halo around everything, which you see in a lot of animes as well, like these really dramatic scenes. And then Evangelion, that's another project I've been recreating a lot of shots in. It's really fun. It's a bit different from the Akira stuff because it's more like character-based, but a lot of cityscapes, a lot of these like anime bloom emissive surfaces, super, super fun. I'm having a ton of fun recreating these scenes. So yeah, definitely, follow me and stuff and check that out. I'm also trying to recreate more Akira shots, but with the newer version of Blender, so Blender 4.5, Blender 5. I'm like really excited to see how much I can get out of Eevee with the newer scenes. So here you can see volumetrics. That's one thing that really blew my mind about the latest version of Eevee is how good volumes are. They're like better than cycles in my opinion. So I was just like, oh, all these other shots I was afraid to do because they're too dramatic or had too much crazy like God rays. Now there's no reason to be afraid of that because it just works and it looks so good. So I'm really excited to finish out some of these shots. There's 2 more shots that, the one on the right is pretty much done. That's made with 4.5 Eevee. The one on the left, also another one that's work in progress. You can see with the lights, I'm like really trying some new stuff. So yeah, so if you want to follow my progress on a lot of these and all the work in progress stuff, definitely just like follow me or follow my socials and everything like that. So thank you.